Well, welcome back to Brands Hatch for our second GT Cup Championship race of the day. We saw the sprint race earlier on. It's the endurance or pit stop race that's coming up very, very shortly. Conditions still changeable here at Brands Hatch. Feels rather autumnal as well as the occasional spots of rain just begin to fall. The cars are just starting to nose their way out of the garages and then will make their way round, ready to line up on the grid for our second race of the day. 4 to come over the course of the weekend. Well, as I said, this is endurance race coming up. We had the sprint race earlier on today, which caused us plenty of excitement and action. So let's look back at some of the highlights. In the first GT Cup Championship race of the weekend at Brands Hatch, Graham Tilley and Seamus Jennings were on the front row of the grid, and as they charged their way up towards Paddock Hill Bend for the first time, the Porsche almost got his nose ahead. As they went through the corner though, they were greeted with a greasy track which caused problems for Seamus Jennings. He wasn't the only one to have issues though. Several cars all spinning, and eventually one of them, Charlotte Gilbert, ending up in the gravel trap. That brought about the safety car while the circuit and the cars were taken out of harm's way. Problems in the early stages of the race also for Tom Barrow in the Saxon Motorsport BMW. He came into the pit lane with the top hose having blown off. When the race got back underway, it was actually John Dillon that had taken up the lead of the race through the problems of all of those cars at the start. Graham Tilley though didn't take much longer before the Nissan was able to carve its way through up the inside at Hawthorns and take up the lead of the race. Jim Geddy was one of several cars that were faced with working their way back up through the order after his problems and spin at turn number 1. Further down through the order, Morgan Tilbrook was doing great things at the wheel of the Mercedes AMG, fighting away with the Make It Happen Ginetta in the hands of Stephen Walton, and he was trying to gain places. It all looked beautifully under control for Graham Tilley, and then what initially looked like a mistake up at Stirling's corner turned out to be a mechanical issue with the car. As he tried to drag his way back out through the gravel, the front right wheel had parted company. However, Graham thought he'd gone off on oil, so continued round before eventually retiring the car. The hard work also continued for Morgan Tilbrook as he was looking to try and work his way up into second position in Group GT8, but also conscious that the championship winning car in the hands of Steve Rushton, the McLaren, was behind, who eventually was able to go through and grab the place. Seamus Jennings, having had that spin and having dropped all the way down through the order, eventually carved his way back to the lead of the race, taking the lead away from John Dillon's Scott Sport prepared Ferrari 488. So it was Seamus Jennings that came through to win the first race of the weekend in the GT Cup Championship, from John Dillon in second place, and a great charging drive following his spin at the first corner went the way of Jim Geddy. So as I said, plenty of action in the race earlier on today. Oh, what could have been for Graham Tilley. Looked to have everything under control until that front wheel fell off. I mentioned that he hadn't realised it had happened. He continued round and completed the lap, and actually was doing 133 miles an hour over the start-finish line with just 3 wheels on the car before he eventually realised something was very much amiss. So we didn't catch up with Graham Tilley after the race, but we did catch up with the race winner, Seamus Jennings, to gauge his thoughts on what was a fairly fraught and frantic race number 1.
Well, the first sprint race was very interesting. Turn 1, I started P2 on the grid beside the Nissan. Turn 1, we went through it, and somebody from the previous race must have put fluid down or oil, because I immediately spun, went onto the grass, and I think there were 2 or 3 cars behind me spun as well. So whenever I get restarted off the grass, I ended up plumb last. The only thing that saved me was there was a safety car because of the cars that were in the gravel. So I managed to catch up to the end of the pack. And then the restart, I set about moving forward as quickly as possible. And I managed to work my way right up to the front and eventually overtake John Dillon. And I got top step of the podium, which was really surprising. And I'm delighted with that.
So there's Seamus Jennings, who we caught up with after the race earlier on. We can already see his car is positioned there on the front row of the grid. It's the only car that sits there on the front row of the grid, because we are as yet waiting to see Graham Tilley's Nissan come through. It's just now going to have to work its way through the order. Let's give you the full grid then, and the starting drivers, and we can also then tell you about the success seconds that will have to be served come the pit stop window. The car of Graham Tilley will start from pole position, 20 success seconds to spend in the pit lane. This is on top of the mandatory 60 seconds that everybody has to spend, and the car that sits alongside will be started by Seamus Jennings, the GCAT Racing Porsche, also an extra 20 seconds come the pit window. Row 2 of the grid, it's the Scott Sport Lamborghini Huracan of Jim Geddy who will start at 20 seconds additional time in the pit lane on top of the standard 60, and it's the same for the car that sits alongside, the number 61 Scott Sport Ferrari, that will be started by John Dillon. The third row of the grid, number 99, is Charlotte Gilbert in the Top Cats Racing Marcos Mantis, off scratch, no additional times to worry about, and alongside is the Team Hard Ginetta. Simon Orange will start, 20 success seconds they will serve. Row 4 of the grid, no additional seconds to worry about for number 34 Callum Jenkins. Alongside is Alan Purbrick behind the wheel of the Seiko, number 30. They've just got 6 seconds addition to their time. Row 5 of the grid, Craig Wilkins racing on his own at the wheel of the number 80 Scott Sport Ginetta, an extra 10 seconds in the pit lane, but it's 20 seconds for the car that sits alongside, the Mercedes, number 66 Enduro Motorsport, started by Morgan Tilbrook. Row 6 of the grid, the reigning champions, the JMH Automotive McLaren, in the hands of Steve Ruston for part 1 of the race. 10 additional seconds in the pit lane. 20 additional seconds in the pit lane. It's 10 additional seconds for the car that sits alongside the Feathers Motorsport Ginetta of James Guess. On to row number 7. That's the number 212 Ginetta that is started by Stephen Walton. No additional seconds for them to worry about, and neither does the car alongside, the Team Hard number 17 Ginetta of Patrick Collins. Row 8 of the grid is the second of the 2 Top Cats Racing Marcos Mantis cars, which is Jensen Lunn for the start of the race. No additional seconds to worry about. Alongside, though, 15 extra seconds in the pit lane for the Aston Martin from Whitebridge Motorsport, Chris Murphy. Row 9 of the grid, 6 extra seconds for the Triple M Motorsport Ginetta, started by Dan Morris, and 15 seconds additional in the pit lane for the Century Motorsport Ginetta of Alex Stevenson that sits alongside. Row 10 of the grid, an extra 15 seconds come the pit window for the second of the 2 Whitebridge Motorsport Aston Martins of Steve Burt. For company, it's an extra 15 seconds for the Team Hard Porsche of Sam Randon, that had problems and I don't think even started the race earlier on today. And at the back of the grid, 10 extra seconds for the Saxon Motorsport BMW, started by Tom Barrow. He is the sole driver in that one. And at the back of the grid, it did have problems, but I'm pleased to say it is out there. The number 6 Sam Allpass, Jeff Steele Racing prepared BMW, mid-engined BMW. So it looks as though there might just be one gap on the grid possibly, and we are missing the number 34 Ginetta of Callum Jenkins. Can't see that car on the grid, so green flag waves either way. They start to make their way around the circuit on the formation lap for this 50-minute pit stop race. Now, in the pit stop race, pit stop must be carried out by passing the pit entry timing loop between the 24th and 35th minute of the race, i.e. between 26 minutes to go and 15 minutes to go. All of the cars have to come in and break the beam at pit lane entry at that point, and as we said, all of the cars have to be stationary for a minimum of 60 seconds plus the time to pass through the pits at the pit lane speed limit, which equates to about an extra 17 seconds I think at the pit lane speed limit we have at Brands Hatch. All of the success seconds then are added to that stationary time, so for the cars on the front row of the grid, it's not 60 seconds they will have to be stationary, it's an extra 20 on top of that. So when Graham Tilley hands over to Will Tregertha, the pro behind the wheel of the Nissan, that will have to take place within that 80 seconds that the car is stationary. And when Simon Jenkins hands over to the pro, who's taking over the number 33 GCAT Racing Porsche, that being Greg Caton, again they will remain stationary for 80 seconds. Jim Geddy will hand over to Sun Glynn on row number 2. John Dillon will hand over to the pro driver Phil Quaife on the outside of row number 2, and then on row number 3 Charlotte Gilbert will vacate the car and hand over to Jensen Lunn, who is starting the sister car to it. So Jensen starts in the number 3 car, finishes the race in the 99. He's going to be a busy chap in this one, and choreography of when those cars come into the pit lane is quite critical. And alongside is the number 67 car, which Simon Orange will start, and the rather rapid Josh Jackson will take over. They've been a good pairing, Josh Jackson and Simon Orange, in the GT Cup Championship for the last season or so now. They came into this weekend leading the championship overall, leading Group GTA as well, Group GTA for the lesser powered cars. In reality, we've got 6 classes now. Group GT3 for the GT3 cars, Group GTO for the open spec cars. Don't have any of those on the grid this weekend. Group GTC for the later model Challenge and Cup cars, but they are balanced by performance. Group GTB is for the early years Challenge and Cup cars, again balanced by performance. Group GTH is for the GT4 homologated cars, and then of course we've got Group GTA. Watch out for that light green Porsche off the tail end of the field. I think, providing all is well for the number 78 Team Hard Porsche, Sam Randon should make a little bit of progress both in the race overall and in Group GTB, which is the car category in which that car competes. So we are in neat 2x2 order, ready for this final race of the day for the GT Cup Championship. The pit stop race is about to get underway. Graham Tilley and Seamus Jennings once more on the front row of the grid. The lights go out and it's a poor start from the second row of the grid from John Dillon, who is beaten off the line, but it's a fantastic start from Jim Geddy, who is already up into second position and ahead of Seamus Jennings when they're heading towards Paddock Hill Bend. I suspect it's because Seamus was conscious of the spin that he had in race number 1. He's dropped down into third position. All the rest of the field safely through Paddock Hill Bend this time through. Already that pink and light green Porsche starting to make some progress as well at the tail end of the shot in the hands of Sam Randon. He's about to dive up the inside of the reigning champions heading in towards Graham Hill Bend, but it's Graham Tilley that leads the race. Jim Geddy in second place, Seamus Jennings there in third place, and fourth is a number 61 Ferrari 488 of John Dillon that's there in fourth place at this stage. The Top Cats Racing Marcos Mantis completes the top 5. So Graham Tilley looking to try and break away in the lead of the race. The wheel just came undone was the information that they'd received. They were in conjunction with the car manufacturer just to see if there's anything else they could do to investigate the issue. Graham Tilley very thankful the fact that the car was in one piece and it had come off at that part of the circuit. There's the Porsche, look, still working its way through. I said watch out for Sam Randon. I thought the Team Hard Porsche would make progress, and I think that car might be inside the top 10, you know, by the end of this lap. It started in 20th position on the grid, bouncing over the curbs, trying to attack the Enduro Motorsport Mercedes in the hands of Morgan Tilbrook. So the leader's just heading up towards the completion of lap number 1, and as they head over the start-finish line, lap number 1 chalked into the book. Graham Tilley is going to be out front leading the race and looking to pull away. Sam Randon at the wheel of the Porsche still continuing to make the progress. He gets through and ahead of Morgan Tilbrook's Mercedes that time, and the next of the cars he's going to want to try and attack is that car there, the man from the West Midlands, which is Craig Wilkins at the wheel of his Scott Sport Prepared Ginetta. So Sam Randon, yeah, I thought he might be inside the top 10, exactly 10th at the end of the first lap of the race, from 20th on the grid. Great charge from the youngster. James Guest going side by side with the number 34 Callum Jenkins driven Ginetta. They are in separate groups. The Team Hard car, which is the number 34 car, runs in Group GTA. James Guest that sits behind is a full GT4 specification car, so he runs in Group GTH. Can't quite squeeze his way through, I'm afraid. And he's then got the Porsche of Sam Randon looking to try and usher him along at the same time as well. Out of Surtees, speeds build towards Pilgrim's Drop. This is the fight that's going on for third and fourth position. The Porsche, the GCAT Racing Porsche, full GT3 spec car in the hands of Seamus Jennings, under pressure from the GTC spec car, which is John Dillon. Porsche from Ferrari. And at the moment, we've got, 6 different manufacturers represented inside the top 6 in this race. Nissan leads, Lamborghini second, Ferrari is there in fourth position because the Porsche of Seamus Jennings sits ahead, and then it's Marcus and Ginetta thereafter. So lap number 2 about to be completed as they start to stretch their legs along the straight that brings them up towards Clearways and Clark Curve. Whilst the top 6 cars are sprinting away at this stage. Now, since making all of the good progress, Sam Randon has sort of plateaued a little bit now, from 20th up to 10th on the first lap. Over the start-finish line he comes now, gained 3 more places on that lap, so up to 7th position now for the Porsche. Battles further back continuing as well. The lead battle of Group GTH is well worth watching. Sam Randon looking to try and squeeze his way up the inside and just manages to get through. Simon Orange saw that he was coming and allowed the Group GTB Porsche to get through the Group GTA Ginetta. So up to 6th position now after just, 2 and a bit laps of racing for Sam Randon. And the next of the cars he's going to want to try and hunt down is going to be the number 99 car, which is Charlotte Gilbert, scheduled to have started that car. Rain beginning to fall, though the rain is really starting to come down now, and that is going to make things very tricky. And there's a spin, I'm afraid, coming out of Surtees' corner, and that caught out one of the cars there. That was Craig Wilkins that had the rotation, his Scott Sport Ginetta pointing in the wrong direction, And with the rain continuing to fall, windscreen wipers going on, all of the cars running on Pirelli slick tyres, such were the conditions at the beginning of the race. This is going to make things very, very, very difficult. It doesn't fall too much more. They might be able to just continue round on slicks, but certainly on the camera it looked as though the rain was really falling. Some drivers will be able to deal with better than others, but no, that is absolutely bucketing it down there, and surely they're going to have to come in and change onto a wet tyre before too much longer. It looks as though it's fairly localised at some parts of the circuit, but when the rain's falling that heavily, you have zero choice. The tyres might be warm, but they will get cool very quickly in these conditions, and everybody surely is now going to be diving their way in towards the pit lane to change tyres. Not all of them are. Most of them are continuing round. The Top Cats Racing Marcus Mantis heads towards the pit lane, but in towards the gravel, I'm afraid to say. That is Patrick Collins that's gone backwards into the gravel trap up at Clark Curve, and that is not in a safe place. It's going to need moving out of harm's way. John Dillon is in the pit lane, ready to change the Ferrari from slick tyres onto wets. Also into the pit lane comes the Enduro Motorsport Mercedes of Morgan Tilbrook, and the championship winners from last year are in the pit lane as well. The JMH Automotive pairing at the wheel of their McLaren 570. Steve Ruston brings the car in towards the pit lane to swap that car from its slick Pirelli tyres onto the treaded tyres. So you see the slicks coming off. The number 61 car, John Dillon. Conversation going on between himself and Phil Quaife, who's scheduled to take over that car. Craig Wilkins with a bit of damage to the front of his car following the spin, so not unsurprising he's come in. Graham Tilley in the meantime, though, at the wheel of the Nissan has braved it out on circuit. He's not the only one though, because Glyn Geddy, Scotsman, might be used to this weather, albeit he really lives in the Middle East now, so doesn't see much rain, but he is still out there at this stage and treading very, very, very gingerly. They are going to have to come in surely at the end of this lap, because you can see the spray, and the safety car is coming out as well now, so they'll be absolutely vital they come in rather than stay out under safety car, otherwise that will really undo all of the hard work. You can see the pace has eased so much for Graham Tilley. Short shifting, being really careful on the brakes, just making sure that they don't snatch a brake, and almost crawling round the corners. Graham Tilley understandably into the pit lane, past the stricken car of Patrick Collins, which awaits recovery in the gravel trap. Jim Geddy also into the pit lane. Everybody will be in the pit lane, changing over from the slicks onto the wets. And as the TechServe Nissan comes to a halt, out come the airlines, out come the slick tyres, which will have been heated, I would have thought, for the vast majority of the teams. And then they will swap the tyres over onto the Pirelli wet tyre, which you've got absolutely no choice what to do. Simon Orange also comes in as well. I think there is only one car that hasn't opted to come into the pit lane, and that's the number 34 car of Callum Jenkins. So there is number one. That's Steve Ruston, who did come in and changed onto the wet tyres, almost ran wide there as well. Safety car out on circuit now. Oh, there is the car that hadn't come in. That's the only car that hadn't changed or come in from a slick tyre onto a wet, and it hasn't worked, the gamble, for Callum Jenkins, because he has dropped that car into the gravel trap at Druids Corner by the look of that. Yeah, he's had problems, and that car has just gone straight on and into the gravel trap at Druids. So amazed that he stayed out for a further lap, but always worth a gamble. Just hasn't worked on this occasion. And Callum Jenkins is in need of recovery now, whilst all of that work goes on in the pit lane. The teams would have been looking to the skies. Weather forecast has always been changeable throughout the course of the day here at Brands Hatch. We've had a few little small spits of rain, but we haven't had the downpour. It certainly came for that one, as back out onto the circuit goes Seamus Jennings, and of course all of these cars have still got another pit stop to do, because the pit window only opens with 26 minutes of the race still remaining, so we are still what, the best part of 15 minutes away from the pit window opening. So no driver changes will have taken place during this safety car period amongst all of the pit stops that are taking place, and those that came into the pit lane, I think on the first lap that the rain started to fall, will have the advantage, because the likes of Graham Tilley, who stayed out for an extra lap, would have surely lost more time completing that extra lap round on slick tyres, with the circuit getting ever wetter. So you can see the work still going on in the pit lane. The Saxon Motorsport BMW is in there. The number 67 car of Simon Orange still being worked on, as is the number 80 Ginetta of Craig Wilkins. The number 9 Century Motorsport Ginetta of Alex Stevenson is in the pit lane as well. The Aston Martins from Whitebridge Motorsport are in the pit lane. And all of the drivers that are poised to take over these cars all ready as well. Most of them in their race suits, none of them with their crash helmets on yet, because they know the pit window is still, what now, 15 minutes away. Now the cloud burst that has happened, the rain isn't falling, I don't think, quite as heavy now. It's such a cold ambient temperature though that surely means that the track isn't going to dry over the course of the remainder of the race. But if it does start to dry a little bit, then particularly if that comes after the pit stop window, we might see a few more cars having to dive onto the dry parts of the circuit potentially, just to try and cool the wet tyres down if they start to overheat. Century Motorsport Ginetta just being held. Lollipop Man raises the lollipop, and back out onto circuit will go Alex Stevenson. Now, under safety car, the number 3 car of Caroline Gilbert actually leads the race. Now, she came into the pit lane very, very early on in the race. In fact, no, it's the number 3 car, which will be Jensen Lunn rather than starting behind the wheel of that car. That will be the car that leads the race. Second in the race at this stage is a car that I think was still in the pit lane, the Whitebridge Motorsport Aston Martin. So I think another lap really before the order fully corrects itself, and at least another lap or 2 behind safety car, because we've still got the stricken car of Patrick Collins that is being dealt with at Clark Curve, which backed itself into the gravel trap in the wet conditions. And then also the number 34 Team Hard Ginetta that was in the hands of Callum Jenkins, that stayed out 1 lap beyond anybody else when the rain started to fall, and that was a decision that the team and the driver will rue. So there is Patrick Collins' car getting dragged out of the gravel. So that is one of the Team Hard Ginettas being removed from the final corner of the gravel, and that's the other Team Hard Ginetta of the 4 that Team Hard have got in general here. 3 Ginettas and a Porsche in this entry list for this weekend. The Group GTB leader is the leader overall. The Group GTC leader is John Dillon's Ferrari. The Group GT3 leader is Seamus Jennings in the Porsche. Safety car is about to come in. We're about to get racing back underway. So into the pit lane comes the car that was, in theory, the race leader. So that means Jensen Lunn now comes into the pit lane, and it will now mean that Sam Randon, from 20th on the grid at the wheel of the Team Hard Porsche, is in reality now leading this race. 2 cars that he needs to try and work his way through, and past on the run up towards the braking area for Druids. But it's the Porsche that leads, the Ferrari in second position, and at the moment holding the pair of them up and wanting to get through, it's Morgan Tilbrook at the wheel of the Mercedes that is holding them up a little bit here. Sam Randon struggling to get off the corner, which gives John Dillon the opportunity to try and work the Ferrari through and ahead of the Porsche. The Ferrari goes through, it runs in Group GTC, so it's likely to outgun the Group GTB Porsche, but Sam Randon gets a better run coming through Surtees corner, and the two of them are going to go side by side this time on towards Pilgrim's Drop. In a straight line though, the Ferrari should have the legs over the Porsche, and indeed, yeah, gets itself back into the lead of the race. But remember, that Porsche in second place has come from 20th position on the grid in the hands of Sam Randon. Great start to the race for him. So the leading pair up towards Westfield. The next of the Porsches is going to be Seamus Jennings, who's there in third position. But the leading pair have got a bit of a gap between themselves and this number 33 GCAT Racing Porsche. As out of the pit lane goes the Marcos Mantis. So that is Jensen Lunn now having completed the pit stop. For our race leading pair though, it's just the pair of them that are squabbling away, and in these tricky conditions maybe the lesser powered cars might just have the advantage, the likes of the Group GTC Ferrari and the Group GTB Porsche, over the more powerful GT3 car that sits there in third position, which is Seamus Jennings. So through they go. There goes Sam Randon in second place. Back out of the pit lane following all of the gravel having been removed goes Patrick Collins, able to rejoin into the race. But Ferrari from Porsche, first and second position. Seamus Jennings at the wheel of his Porsche in third place, and that's the fourth place Lamborghini there, just at the back of the shot. In towards the braking area for Druids. This is going to be for 13th and 14th positions. With the car in 4th place, the Lamborghini queuing up behind them. So James Guest is going to blend off the throttle, allow Jim Geddy to work his way through. So that's the Lamborghini now up into 4th position, having dealt with the traffic. More traffic just up the road to deal with, though, for Jim Geddy. In the background, though, it looks as though we've had another spin from one of the Marcos Mantis cars as well. So Jim Geddy at the wheel of the Lamborghini, slowly working his way through the order. Pit window is now 5 minutes away from opening. As, again, Jim Geddy just manages to grab the place over Stephen Walton. Works his way through and ahead of the Ginetta, putting a lap on it in the process. So that is the 4th place car, now lapping the 13th place car. Well, considering how dark the skies were a few minutes ago, the sun is back out and shining again, and I did come up with the possibilities that there could be, towards the end of this race, with the cars circulating, a drier line appearing. For the moment there isn't. You can still see the enormous amount of spray that's coming from the tail end of the Lamborghini, but if we don't get any more rain, it's going to be an intriguing end to the race potentially, if we do see the circuit drying a little bit more. But and at that stage of the year, I suppose, where it's so autumnal, the ambient temperature has been quite low and cold all day here. There's not been too much of a breeze. I'm not sure how much drying the circuit will do. James Guest looking to try and thread his way through. This will be a place for 13th position gained. Sam Allpass at the wheel of the mid-engined BMW, prepared by Jeff Steele Racing up in Curtin Lindsey in Lincolnshire. Also looking, trying to get in on the mix as well. So this is now 13th, 14th and 15th positions altogether. 3 cars in entirely different groups. Group GTH Ginetta, Group GTO BMW. I did say we haven't got any Group GTO cars, but we do. We have the BMW. And then the Ginetta that sits behind, which runs in Group GTA in the hands of Stephen Walton. Sam Allpass looking to try and see whether he can gain another position here, up to 14th, wants 13th place off James Guest. James having none of it. All 3 of those cars running in different groups. And eventually, in a straight line, the far more powerful mid-engine BMW goes through and ahead of the GT4 Ginetta. So that dropped James Guest now down into 14th position. Pit window will open in 3.5 minutes time, and that's where John Dillon will hand the race leading car over to the hugely experienced Phil Quaife. Now that is a car recovering from a spin. That to me looks like it's the number 12 car of Steve Burt that's had the spin. So the Whitebridge Motorsport Ginetta, a few leaves on the front of it, no obvious signs of grass anywhere else in it, but just the way that car appeared into shot suggests that he had a problem down at Graham Hill Bend, and he was just in the process of recovering from that. Steve Burt is circulating down in 19th position currently. So John Dillon leads the race. Sam Randon in his Porsche running in 2nd position. Look at the lines that he's taking there. Ran a little bit wide that time. You'd expect the cars to take a wider line in these tricky conditions through the corners, not the normal racing line. There goes John Dillon, perfect example of it, not taking the normal line, because more cars run around that section, the normal racing line, than they do offline, and therefore the tarmac becomes more polished, which means when it rains there's less grip on the usual racing line, so you take a wider arc around the corner, staying away from the apex, and then that means you're on the less polished tarmac that's not used as much, and that gives you that little bit more adhesion. There goes number 80, Craig Wilkins. Remember, he had the spin just as the rain started to fall. Scott Sport Team moving that car from slicks onto wets as everybody did. A little bit of damage to the front of Craig's car was dealt with as well, and that looked like another off there potentially. That's Charlotte Gilbert recovering from having had a moment up at Druids. That car is now running down in 17th position, and that's the 18th place car, which is Alex Stevenson. He shares that car with former Ginetta champion and front runner, which is James Kellett. So that's 8th position. The class leader in Group GTH, John Whitehouse. That's the car that leads Group GTH. Important championship points for John Whitehouse, who will take over that car. Steve Ruston driving it at the moment. So they'll be wanting to try and add to their championship tally here at Brands Hatch. They were in a handy position in Group GTH coming into this weekend. They were lying third in the overall standings, leading Group GTH, their particular class, and earlier on today they finished fourth in that group, so that would still add to that championship tally, but will have meant that the advantage they had in the group was closed up a little bit. And the pit window is now less than a minute away from opening at this stage. The car to watch out for at the moment is probably Graham Tilley. Here we go, there's another fight there. That is the two Ginettas together. That's not for position. That's the car in 5th place, trying to get past the car in 14th position. There's also been a spin down at Graham Hill Bend for Sam Allpass at the wheel of the BMW. So just as he was making progress at the wheel of that mid-engine BMW, he's had a problem at Graham Hill Bend and has recovered just to hang on to 12th position. So Chris Murphy at the wheel of the Aston Martin went through ahead of the BMW following Sam Allpass's spin. And now Sam Allpass will try and make a bit more progress again. Goes to show how tricky it is out there still. James Guess threading his way in 13th place through the right-hander at Hawthorne. Chris Murphy not that far behind him. Our race leader still pressing on in the lead of the race. Now onto lap number 13, so 12 laps completed. Pit window is now open as well, so at the end of this lap we could start to see our race leader come in. It wasn't open as he came over the start-finish line, but it has now opened, which means that other cars behind him could pit. So as soon as we get to the 24th minute of the race, cars can pit, and indeed that's exactly what the 3rd place car does. So Seamus Jennings comes into the pit lane. The pro driver, which is Greg Caton, is ready to dive on board the race-winning car from earlier on. So Seamus Jennings is eased out of the car by the mechanic. Greg Caton is ready to be shoved into the car. In goes the seat insert. In goes Greg Caton. You can see all the rest of the drivers are suited and booted and ready to go. The driver with the Apex tubular overalls on will be Glyn Geddy, ready to jump into what is now the 3rd place car, which is the Lamborghini Huracan, driven by father Jim. Jim, a former champion in the GT Cup. Jim and Glyn together were British GT champions some years ago. Glyn had a very brief career in the British Touring Car Championship and returned to British GT last year, Glyn Geddy. But himself and his father have done a chunk of racing over in the Middle East as well, at the likes of Dubai and Yas Marina and Bahrain as well, one would have thought. So, number 67 is Simon Orange, running in 4th position at the moment, going well. The car that's behind him on the road is the Nissan, which is Graham Tilley, who stayed out for that extra lap on his slick tyres, which didn't quite work. And Graham Tilley, you'd have thought again, might be in soon. It will be handed over to Will Tregurtha, the Nissan. So there goes the Nissan, the red car with the 2 Dayglow yellow stripes down the centre. Car that used to race in the British GT Championship. Into the pit lane comes John Dillon. This is to hand over to the pro driver Phil Quaife. So John dives out of the car. Phil is about to jump on board. Seen a chunk of Phil racing both modern GT and historic GT machinery over the years. So that is the race leading car into the pit lane now. Also Jim Geddy came in to hand over to Glyn Geddy, which now means that Sam Randon at the wheel of the Team Hard Porsche, that's come from 20th on the grid, picks up the lead of the race. The Nissan is in as well, so Graham Tilley bringing the Nissan GT3 car into the pit lane to hand over to former British GT champion in the GT4 category, Will Tregurtha. So pit lane starting to fill up. More and more and more cars in the pit lane. Of course, remember, the likes of that Ferrari at the front end of the queue in the pit lane has to remain stationary, not just for 60 seconds, which is the minimum everybody does. It has to remain stationary for an extra 20 seconds on top of that, such as the success seconds that have been accumulated. The car that's behind it is the car of the Geddys. That's Jim just plugging in son Glyn. That car will head back out onto circuit. Out goes James Kellett now behind the wheel of the number 9 Century Motorsport prepared car. Century Motorsport, busy old team nowadays, owned and run by Nathan Freak, running cars in both the British GT Championship, in the Ginetta Super Cup, and in GT Cup amongst many others as well. So that car rejoins. And that's the number 12 car of Steve Burt. He's running in sixth in his class at the moment, which is Group GTH. 17th position overall. So he's a little way off the pace in these tricky conditions of everybody else, and now back into the race has come what was the race leading car in reality. So Phil Quaife now safely on board the number 61 Ferrari, vacated by John Dillon, now in the hands of Phil Quaife. But of course there's still a few cars that haven't pitted as yet. We haven't seen Tom Barrow in the Saxon Motorsport BMW in, we haven't seen Simon Orange in the number 67 Team Hard Ginetta in, and we haven't seen Sam Randon, wheel of the number 78 Team Hard Porsche in. So those cars, Randon, Orange and Barrow, are running first, second and third at the moment. So James Kellett runs a little bit wide, allows Phil Quaife to squeeze the Ferrari 488 through. So GT3 car goes through and ahead of the number 9 car in the hands of James Kellett that runs in Group GTA. And as Phil Quaife is about to complete his first lap, having got behind the wheel of the car, there is the race leader. So through goes Sam Random at the wheel of the Porsche. Still has yet to stop at this stage. Still another, 5 or 6 minutes of the pit window being open, so there's plenty of time for the teams to decide when they want to pit the cars. Patrick Collins comes in, that's the car that was in the gravel. That will be to hand over to Russ Lindsay. The car that's in front of it is Simon Orange giving way to Josh Jackson. That car had worked itself up into second place, the number 67 car, before it came into the pit lane. I think Team Hard have got 3 of their 4 cars that are entered in this one, all in the pit lane together, so busy at the moment on the Team Hard crew. Dealing with the drivers. Now James Guess at the wheel of the Feathers Motorsport Ginetta is running 5th in Group GTH. He's got Sam Allpass trying to lap him at the wheel of the Jeff Steele Racing BMW. Change of driver as well. Callum Jenkins, who stayed out on the slicks and went in the gravel, now handing over to the youngster Harry Yardley Rose. I think must be the youngest driver that we've got in the field, Harry Yardley Rose. Certainly at the beginning of the season he was only just 16, 17 years of age, so one of the younger drivers in the field. But we'll give you a full rundown of the order as and when all the pit stops have cycled through, because the number 78 car that leads, Sam Random, hasn't pitted and has now just entered the pit lane, as has the car in second place, which is Tom Barrow. So in third position, albeit on the screen you can see 34 seconds and a lap behind, that is potentially going to be the car that will take up the lead very shortly, because we are still cycling through the back end of the pit stop window, which in 4 minutes time will fully close. Big fan blowing cold air onto the front end of the Saxon Motorsport BMW. That's the car that retired very early on in race number 1 with the top hose, I think it was, that had fractured on the car and came in lots of steam coming from under the bonnet. So the team, I'm sure, keen just to try and make sure they keep the temperatures down on that very rapid, self-built and developed Saxon Motorsport BMW 1 Series. Now, as expected, the Ferrari has gone back through into the lead of the race now. The car of Greg Caton, I think, should now be up into second position by the end of this lap. It'll be another lap before it fully shows in that position because of when the Porsche came into the pit lane, but we saw a good stint put in by Seamus Jennings, who was able to work that car towards the sharp end of the grid. Back into the pit lane has come Craig Wilkins, so he is just waiting for the clock to count down so that he can re-head back out into circuit. And then I think we've almost got through all of the pit stops in this one, and we can finally run ourselves down through the order. Without question, it's Phil Quaife though now at the wheel of number 61 Ferrari that's leading this race. As the Saxon Motorsport BMW that remains in the hands of Tom Barrow heads back out onto circuit, and I think will be in something like 14th position by the time he has concluded his pit stop, under pressure from the Ginetta of Craig Wilkins that sits behind. Still tricky conditions out there. You can still see just how greasy it is. It certainly has dried. There's not the same amount of spray coming up from the tail end of the cars as there was earlier on in this race when we had the cloud burst, but it still looks rather tricky. So here's our race leader, number 61, Phil Quaife, flashing his lights to try and usher the Team Hard Ginetta out of the way. That's the number 34 car that's just been taken over by Harry Yardley-Rose. Phil Quaife dives up the inside of that. He'll also deal with Russ Lindsay on the exit of the corner. Has a bit of a moment directly ahead of the race leader. So Phil Quaife now able to get past another one of the Team Hard Ginettas. So Phil Quaife leading the race by about 12.5 seconds now from the car that was in the hands of Sam Randon and is now in the hands of Ben Claydon, the Team Hard Porsche, the pink and light green car that sits there in what will be second position. But there's quite a sizable gap now that Phil Quaife can just control towards the end of this race. So out of Hawthorns, down what was previously known as the Derek Minter Straight towards Westfield goes our race leader. There'll be more traffic to deal with as well before too much longer. That's the Group GTH McLaren, the 570S GT4, car of John Whitehouse. That's the next of the cars that's going to be lapped, and that car is in 8th position at the moment, so that's the last of the cars that for the moment remains on the lead lap. But John Whitehouse is going to move out of the way. Phil Quaife is going to pass driver's right, grab the inside line, heading up towards Clearways Corner. Back marker dealt with. Phil Quaife can now continue on his merry way, so it's only the top 7 cars that now remain on the lead lap of the race. Leading the race, leading Group GTC, is Phil Quaife. Second in the race and leading Group GTB is Ben Claydon. Third in the race and leading Group GT3 is Seamus Jennings at this stage. Group GTA is being led by Josh Jackson, number 67. Group GTH is being led by that McLaren that's now dropped off the lead lap of the race. And Group GTO is Sam Allpass at the wheel of his BMW, the only car that for this weekend is running in that group. So 15 minutes of the race to go. Phil Quaife, last lap through with the traffic to deal with, lapped a little bit slower than the car that was in second place, and we have had a change for second as well, because the Porsches have swapped. That car there, which is in the hands of Ben Claydon, has now dropped down through the order. It was in second place, well it's now down into 4th position, because not only has Greg Caton gone through, but also Glyn Geddy at the wheel of the number 77 Lamborghini Huracan has gone through. So Ben Claydon, in his first season really of motorsport, learning all of the time from Sam Randon, has been quick all season really. That car had an awful weekend at Donington Park, the light green and pink Porsche, but it's been there or thereabouts all of the time when it's had the look on its side. So Sam Allpass this is, leading Group GTO. He runs down in 10th position. He's got the 11th place car right behind him, which is going to be Chris Hart for part 2 of this race, and then Will Tregurtha, who runs in 5th position, trying to put a lap on them. So these two guys busy having their own little squabble, but former British GT champion in the GT4 class at the wheel of that Nissan is closing in. Will Tregurtha won that championship with Stuart Middleton in the Ginetta a couple of seasons ago. Will, who was also very competitive when he was racing in Ginetta Juniors, and now with the opportunity to drive this fantastic car that Graham Tilley has bought. Oh, almost Sam Allpass, I don't think saw him there. Sam Allpass was busy trying to work his way past one of the Marcos Mantis cars and just closed the door a little bit on Will Tregurtha there, who is desperate to try and put the GT3 Nissan ahead of the GTO BMW. He's trying to lap him at the end of the day. So this is the 5th place car, trying to work its way past the 10th place car, and Will Tregurtha, I think, has yet finally managed to do it. So through goes Will. And now Sam Allpass is potentially about to lose out a result of that, as Chris Hart's BMW looks to try and steal 10th place away from him. Chris Hart, I think, destined just to sit there in 11th still at the moment at the wheel of the Ginetta. So over the start-finish line comes Sam Allpass. This is another little fight that's going on as well. This is going to be Tom Barrow at the wheel of the 6th place BMW, working his way through traffic. So that Saxon Motorsport BMW has had a really good run actually. He's got himself in between the two Ginettas, the front one of which is James Guess in 13th place. The one behind, the red one, is Craig Wilkins, who's there in 14th place. So So Greg Caton dealing with traffic as well, slides his way effortlessly past the GT4 spec McLaren. Now for the moment, there goes the Porsche, there is the Lamborghini. Now this is the fight for second and third place that's closing up here. Greg Caton getting caught by Glyn Geddy. The gap between the pair of them closed up by 2.6 seconds on the previous lap. So the Porsche coming under pressure from the Lamborghini Huracan. What can the Scotsman do about closing in on that Porsche? They've dealt with the traffic, they've dealt with the Group GTH leading McLaren, but as they head through Paddock Hill Bend, there is the Porsche, the GCAT Racing Porsche, and right behind it is the Lamborghini. 1 3/4 seconds between the pair of them. They do run in separate groups. Group GT3 for the Porsche, Group GTC for the Lamborghini, but it's not going to stop Glyn Geddy. Wanted to try and propel that car up through the order if he can. Down the straight, in towards the braking area for Surtees. And Glyn Geddy runs wide onto the curbs, almost lost the tail end of the car there, onto the painted curbs in this weather is not what you want to be doing. But he got away with the mistake, but that's going to compromise his speed all the way down this next straight and in towards Hawthorns. So he lost 1/10 of a second in the first sector. It's the second sector that's the critical key as to how much he lost, because the first sector ends part the way down the Cooper Straight, and it was after the Cooper Straight where he made the mistake. So it's really only once we get towards the entrance towards Stirling's we'll see exactly how much time was lost with that mistake. Bouncing it over the curbs up towards the left-hander, and actually was still quicker than the car ahead. So Glyn Geddy is going to have brought that gap down even more. It's going to be around about a second, I would have thought, by the end of this lap. Still got this fight going on for 10th and 11th position as well. Sam Allpass under enormous pressure from Chris Hart, who this time gets a good run at the wheel of the Ginetta, heading out of Surtees corner. Can they make it happen? Racing Ginetta squeeze its way through? No, because in a straight line the extra grunt of the Group GTO BMW tells, and the mid-engine car that started 22nd on the grid still hangs on to what is 10th position for the moment. 10 minutes of the race still to go. Phil Quaife, the race leader, still threading his way through the traffic. About to lap for the second time James Guess at the wheel of the Team Feathers Ginetta. John Dillon had a really good stint earlier on. We saw John Dillon finished second in the race earlier on in the sprint race and claimed top honours in Group GTC. John Dillon, who's shared this car with both Phil Quaife and Aaron Scott over the course of the season, had plenty of group wins, only had one overall win. He's had, 4 second places, 5 if you add the one from earlier on. He's had, 3 third places, a 4th and a 5th as well, so it's been a consistent car all year, barring race 2 at Donington Park, the first of the endurance races that we had there, pit stop races, where the car retired unfortunately, but other than that it's been a consistent and a very quick car all year, and it's leading here in the first of our pit stop races of the weekend for the GT Cup Championship. There's number 34, Harry Yardley Rose, trying to work his way past the Top Cats Racing Marcos Mantis. Any result really for that car disappeared when Callum Jenkins put it into the gravel, I'm afraid to say, trying to gamble and stay out on the slick tyres for an extra lap compared to everybody else, and then getting caught out in what were unbelievably tricky conditions. It's now getting to that stage of the race though where it's going back from being wet to just being greasy in between, and that's not what the drivers like really. Oh, little bit of contact there, I think, almost, as Phil Quaife was trying to work his way past the traffic, and I think unsighted there, the car of Ian Duggan almost was taken out by the Ferrari. They were so close to each other. I think there was just the lightest of touches between the pair of them, but Ferrari are eventually able to go through, and I don't think any damage caused to either, but certainly it looked as though for a brief second there was maybe a touch wing mirror to wing mirror on those two cars, but both of them largely got away with that. 8 minutes of the race to go. Phil Quaife leading by 17.2 seconds on lap number 22 of the race, and I think has just eased his pace a little bit as well through some of the traffic. There'll be more traffic to deal with as well. The Whitebridge Motorsport of Chris Murphy that runs in 16th position is the next of the cars that's going to be dealt with by Phil Quaife, who moves to driver's left and propels the Ferrari around the outside of the Aston Martin to take a big sweep in towards the conclusion of the lap at Clearways and Clark Curve. Wiltrigurtha is running in 4th position now. The big Nissan was in 5th on the previous lap, but he's now got himself through and ahead of the pink Porsche in the hands of Ben Claydon. As you would expect, the more powerful and aerodynamically efficient GT3 car getting through and ahead of the Porsche Super Cup specification number 78 machine. So Ben Claydon now lost a further place, but more importantly, that is still the Group GTB leading car, so still first in class for that car at the moment, and a 46-second advantage in the class as well over the car that runs in 6th place behind it, which is Tom Barrow's BMW, Saxon Motorsport car. So a very handy and comfortable Group GTB lead for Ben Claydon, mixed with the work he's done in part 2 of the race and the hard work that Sam Randon did, hauling that car up through the order. This is that car that's actually second in the group there, at the head of this little train, Tom Barrow's machine. Very busy section of the circuit for Greg Caton at the wheel of the 2nd place GCAT Racing Porsche. He's dealt with the vast majority of them, just the BMW to deal with now. And this is now Glyn Geddy that's also tasked with the same issue of trying to work his way past James Guess's car. James Guess has got Ian Duggan directly ahead of him. They run in separate groups. They do look like Ginettas, identical Ginettas, but they do run in separate groups. So Ian Duggan lets the Lamborghini through. Another place gained for Glyn Geddy. And now there's, another 2 or 3 slower cars for the Lamborghini to deal with. Round the outside of 2 of them. Very brave stuff. All problems. That's Ian Duggan that spins directly ahead of James Guess. Having to take to the grass as well is Craig Wilkins. Now Ian Duggan just managed to catch the tail end of the Ginetta there, but that's a couple of places lost there because James Guess was in 13th, Craig Wilkins was in 14th, but both of them have gone through. So I think Ian Duggan, that little moment, will lose him 2 places. 5 minutes of the race to go. Up towards Paddock Hill Bend goes Glyn Geddy, about to carve his way past Tom Barrow's BMW. So that is the car that runs in 3rd place, now lapping the car in 6th position in the race. And Glyn Geddy, we always knew was going to be quick behind the wheel of this car. We saw what both himself and his father Jim could do at Donington when they appeared, running in the invitation class, so they won't be scoring championship points. And in the races that we had at Donington Park, they finished 4th overall in the first 2 races, were 5th in the 3rd race of the weekend. That would have netted them a serious amount of championship points had they been eligible for them. Shame that we hadn't seen them earlier on in the season as well, but I suppose business commitments for the pair keep them away. But for John Dillon and Phil Quaife, all looking as though it's all going to plan for them. 4 minutes of the race to go, 24 laps about to be completed. It leads the race and leads Group GTC. This is still, at this stage, Wiltrigurtha in 4th position. Now that car runs 2nd in Group GT3. So Group GT3 leading car is the number 33 GCAT Racing Porsche. Wiltrigurtha is a fair chunk behind that at this stage. See just how much the track has dried over the course of the last 50 minutes or so. James Guest still working overtime to thread his Ginetta through and past the Top Cats racing Marcus Mantis. Now James Guest lies 12th overall at the wheel of the number 82 Ginetta. That will actually put him 3rd in the group at this stage. So he'll be, I'd have thought, reasonably happy with that, James. In the race earlier on, James finished 2nd in the group, but of course he's had success seconds to overcome in this particular race. And for James Guess, it was an extra 10 seconds that he had to spend in the pits. Now the Porsche of Ben Claydon still circulating as the Group GTB leader. Called up through the order by Sam Randon in the early stages. Ben Claydon losing a little bit of time to the more powerful cars, which were able to pick them off. But either way, that's a good performance for the car, having started in 20th position. He's now running in 5th place and leading its group. This car here runs in 12th position, 3rd in Group GTH, James Guest. The 4th car in the group sits behind in 13th position, which is Craig Wilkins. So this is a battle for position between those 2 Ginettas. And the third of the Ginettas, which is the one at the tail end of the field, is going to be, I think, one of the Team Hard cars, which runs in a separate group. So we're heading towards the final couple of minutes of the race now. In towards the braking area at Druids comes Phil Quaife, and should be on to his penultimate lap this time through. So the lap is on and one more thereafter. Just coming up to place another lap on Sam Allpass. So this is lap number 26 now for Phil Quaife, having taken over this car from John Dillon. And it looks as though it is poised potentially to grab a second overall win of the 2020 season. And a 10th group win of the season, if we add in the one that was taken earlier on today. So through Hawthorns, down the short straight in towards the braking area for Westfield. Phil Quaife, who has got huge amounts of experience, so he drives a mixture of contemporary sports cars and historic sports cars. You can see the glow on the carbon fibre brakes of that car as it came in towards the braking area for Sheen Curve that time through. There's more traffic as well to deal with up the road, and this will be the 5th place car that's potentially going to get lapped as well. So Ben Claydon may well be advised just to let the race leader go through, not try and hold it up, because it means it's one less lap for him to do, and particularly as Ben leads the group, let the class leader through or let the race leader through in a different group, and then it's one less racing lap that you've got to try and do. So Ben Claydon sees the race leader coming, lets the Ferrari go through, and now drops off the lead lap. So it's now only the top 4 cars that remain on the lead lap, and we are now into the final few seconds of this race as Phil Quaife for the final time makes his way round through Druids. Well, we had the big rain and cloudburst earlier on in the race where everybody went out on the slick tyres, which without question were the right things to do for the first few laps of the race. Then the rain started to fall and there was little choice that cars were going to have to come in and change onto wet. Some opted to do it immediately. Craig Wilkins got caught out by it and had a spin. Those that came in on the first lap to change to wets were given an advantage as a result of doing so, because you've stayed out for the extra lap, which the likes of Graham Tilley decided to do at the wheel of the Nissan. That meant that that next lap was so much slower as the conditions worsened and worsened. For some, they stayed out an extra lap beyond, which was Callum Jenkins, and he got caught out and went into the gravel trap. So the weather has had a pivotal role to play in the outcome of this first GT Cup Championship race for the pit stop races of the weekend. There goes the glow of the brake discs again in towards Sheen Curve. Fantastic shot is that one. But for John Dillon and Phil Quaife, it's all perfectly gone to plan as far as they are concerned, accelerating their way out of Stirling's, down the straight and in towards the braking area for Clearways Corner. It's going to be a second overall win in the 2020 season of the GT Cup Championship for the Group GTC Ferrari of John Dillon. The previous win came when he was sharing the car with Aaron Scott at Silverstone. This win comes sharing the car with Phil Quaife here at Brands Hatch. So they claim the win. Second place should go the way of Seamus Jennings and Greg Caton's GCAT Racing Porsche, which finishes 8 seconds adrift in the end in second place. But of course that Porsche will also be a group winner in Group GT3, and it's the father and son pairing, Jim and Glyn Geddy, that come home to complete the podium. There goes the number 20 car, which is Tom Barrow. That should finish second in Group GTB in its class, the BMW 1 Series, and that will finish in 6th position overall. And we've still got the fight going on also just behind them between James Guess and what will be Craig Wilkins, fighting over 3rd and 4th in Group GTH. Through comes James Kellett over the start-finish line, sharing the car with Alex Stevenson. That car will complete the top 12. The last of the cars still about to flash their way over the start-finish line. And we've still got fights going on circuit as well. That, I think, is the car that is Harry Yardley Rose fighting away with Chris Hart, but that won't be 4th position. That's Harry Yardley Rose is down in 18th position after the off from Callum Jenkins into the gravel trap, but it's not going to stop Harry rolling his sleeves up and seeing whether he can unpick the Ginetta that lies ahead, whilst they're also trying to put laps on Aston Martins as well. So last few cars will be taking the checkered flag any second now. We've still got our Group GTA winning car to take the checkered flag, which has just done it, which is Josh Jackson, so congratulations to them. And then we can hopefully, once we get the last few cars over the start finish line, we can guide you through the finishing order for this one. in our final GT Cup Championship race over the course of today. We've got the same to look forward to tomorrow as well. We've got the sprint race in the morning, we've got the 50-minute pit stop race in the afternoon, and the extra success seconds again to calculate and worry about. So let's guide you through the order then. There we can see John Dillon chatting away to Phil Quaife, a big smile on his face as they claim the win. So John Dillon and Phil Quaife are the winners. Second place is Seamus Jennings and Greg Caton, but they win Group GT3. And third place is Glyn and Jim Geddy. Fourth place goes the way of Graham Tilley and Will Tregertha, and in fifth place it's a group win, having started 20th on the grid, Ben Claydon and Sam Randron. Sixth place is Tom Barrow. Seventh place is a Group GTH win, coming home through and finishing in seventh place, the Enduro Motorsport Mercedes of Morgan Tilbrook, who is joined by Marcus Clutton. Eighth place, and the Group GTA win goes the way of number 67, which was Simon Orange, who started, and Josh Jackson, who brought it towards the checkered flag. Ninth place is Steve Russon and John Whitehouse, and completing the top 10 was Stephen Walton and Chris Hart. In 11th place, a Group GTO winner, Sam Olpass, and 12th place is Alex Stevenson and James Kellett. 13th place was James Guest. 14th was Craig Wilkins, ahead of 15th place, which was Dan Morris and Ian Duggan. 16th place went the way of Warren Gilbert and Jensen Lunn. 17th place was Callum Jenkins and Harry Yardley Rose, but that's the car that went off in the gravel trap. 18th place was Chris Murphy. 19th place was the Sister Cartwright, Steve Burt. 20th position into the pit lane very late on in the race for Jensen Lunn and Caroline Gilbert, and then 21st position, that will be the last of the finishers, finishing in 21st position, Russ Lindsay and Patrick Collins. Problems, I'm afraid, and retirement earlier on in the race for the ALP Racing Saker of Alan Purbrick and David Bryce. So that wraps up everything from today here in the GT Cup Championship. Don't forget, we've got more racing to come from here tomorrow on day 2 at Brands Hatch. Until then, it's goodbye.